I wired the deposit for my first place in Moalboal off a single listing photo from a cold kitchen back in the States, dead sure I was about to get burned. Before I tell you how it went for me, it'd be great if you take a second to subscribe and hit that thumbs up. That way we stay in touch. Now picture what I actually had in my hand. One photo, a bare room, 4 walls, a floor the color of weak tea. That was the whole deal. Moalboal, on the west coast of Cebu, a town I'd never once set foot in, and the money was already gone, sent off to a name on a screen while my coffee went cold beside the laptop. If you've ever stared at a listing photo from your kitchen table, half a world away, and felt your stomach knot, you already know exactly where I was. And that knot had 3 shapes. 1, the whole thing's a con, and I just handed my savings to a stranger who was already laughing. 2, I show up, and the door never opens, no landlord, no key, just me in a suitcase on a dirt road with the sun going down. 3, the door does open, and the room is half the size of the shot, dark and damp, nothing like the picture that talked me into it. I'm Bennett, I'm 68, and I've been out here 10 years now, long enough that folks write me asking how it's done. But this was year 1. Back then I guessed at everything, every price, every step, every name at the bottom of an email. The rent was posted at 18,000 pesos a month, about $320. And I kept staring at that figure the way you stare at a deal that looks a little too clean. Sure, it was hiding something, $320 for a place near the water in Cebu. What's the catch? What aren't they telling me? Then the waiting was over. The plane came down over water, so blue, it didn't look real, and I was far too nervous to enjoy the view. A tricycle, one of those little motorbikes with a sidecar bolted onto the side, rattled me down a dirt lane past a Sorry store on the corner where a boy was buying one single piece of candy through the wire. Dust in the air, couple of chickens scattering, the engine coughing along, and then it just stopped in front of a plain wooden door, the real door, not the photo, the actual thing right there in front of me. Key in my hand, heart going like a drum. I stood there a good second before I turned it, already writing the disappointment in my head. Be honest right now, you're bracing for me to tell you it was a scam, aren't you? Well, it wasn't. I turned the key, the door swung inward, and there it was. A tile floor, a fan turning slow overhead, a little kitchenette against the far wall. Exactly what the photo had shown me. Not bigger, not smaller, not some bait and switch, plain, honest, real. Every fear I'd carried across the Pacific just sat down quiet in the corner. Nobody had lied to me. The room in the picture was the room standing in front of me. And here's something I've watched play out 100 times since in 10 years out here, I've seen retiree after retiree do the exact thing. I did wire money off into the dark, guessing at the very same questions I was guessing at, hoping to God they read it right. That's the whole reason I finally sat down and wrote it all out. Everything I learned the hard way about making this move, the questions you don't even know to ask yet, it's in my ebook, The One-Way Guide, over in the One-Way Club. It's not a hand holder for folks who want somebody to do the whole thing for them. It's for the ones who'd rather read it through once, calm and unhurried, and stop scrambling for advice from all the wrong corners of the internet. The link's down in the description if that sounds like you. Now, let me be straight with you, because I made myself a promise I always would be. For $320, you don't get everything. There was no air conditioning in that room, no hot water at all, that one fan on the ceiling, and a single cold tap at the sink. That was the entire comfort budget, top to bottom. And those first few nights, believe me, I felt it. I lay there on top of the sheet in the dark, the fan just pushing warm air in circles, and I thought, well, Bennett, you wanted the tropics, here they are. That's the honest bit. Anybody who tells you the heat's not a thing, that first week is selling you something. But the room was true to its word. The room was fine, and that right there should have been the whole story. Man braces for the worst, gets a plain little room, no drama, no surprise, roll the credits, except it wasn't the whole story. Not even close. Because I wasn't alone in there. Over by that kitchenette, a small woman in a yellow house dress was standing at the counter waiting for me, Rosalie, my landlady, and there was something already set out on the counter beside her, something I hadn't expected to find at all. She looked up at me, and the very first thing out of her mouth changed the number I'd braced myself for, that number I'd been staring at, worrying over for weeks. She hadn't even finished saying hello. Rosalie, a small woman in a yellow house address, no taller than my shoulder, just tipped her chin toward the counter where she'd set out a bowl of mangoes, peeled ripe, waiting for a man she'd never once laid eyes on, a stranger who'd wired money from a cold kitchen halfway around the world. That bowl told me more than the listing ever had. A photo is a room. This was a person. And then she said the thing about the rent, I'd braced for 18,000 pesos a month. That was the number in the advert, about $320, and I'd already made my peace with it. But Rosalie stood there wiping her hands on that yellow dress, and she asked me, plain as anything, how long I meant to stay. A year, I told her, maybe more. I didn't really know yet. And she just nodded like a year was the right answer and said she'd make it 14,000. 14,000 pesos, around $250 a month, 1 month as deposit, and that was it. I stood there a second, thinking I'd heard her wrong. Do the arithmetic with me here. $250 a month. Now, hold that against whatever you're paying right now, the mortgage, the rent, the property tax that climbs every single year, and don't flinch. Just sit in that number for a moment. $250 for a place with the sea, a stone's throw away. I'd been paying more than that to keep my car under a roof back home, and that's the part I want you to really feel. The deposit, the 1 month she asked for, was less than I used to hand over for a parking spot in the States, a slab of concrete with a white line painted around it. That's what that money bought me back home. Here, it bought me the keys to a year of my life. I keep coming back to how small that made all my worrying look, because here's what I'd built up in my head. Sitting in that cold kitchen for weeks, I was sure the deal itself would be the nightmare. Contracts I couldn't read, some fee nobody warned me about, a landlord who'd take the deposit and vanish. You know, the fear, the one where you're wiring your money to a name on a screen and every instinct you've got is screaming that you'll never see it again and you'll never see a key either. And instead, Rosalie leaned on the counter, I leaned on the other side, we talked, she asked about my kids, I asked about hers, she told me the water pressure was best in the morning and the fan was new. There was no lawyer, no stack of papers, no drama. At the end of it, she put out her hand and I shook it, and that handshake was the whole contract. A handshake over a bowl of mangoes, that was the terrifying transaction I'd lost sleep over for a month. Now, I want to be straight with you because I always am. It's not that paperwork never matters out here. It does, and there are places you want it in writing, and we'll get into that another day. But that first afternoon with Rosalie, it was just two people deciding to trust each other. And 10 years in, I can tell you she never once gave me a reason to regret it. The friendship started at that counter. It's still going. So there I was. Good room, kind landlady, a rent that had dropped instead of climbed, mangoes on the counter I hadn't asked for. If you'd stopped the tape right there, you'd have called it a happy ending, a nervous old American who braced for a scam and got a friend instead. And honestly, I thought that was the whole story too. I really did. I set my bag down. I ran my hand along the tile. I looked around at the plain little place, the fan turning slow overhead, the kitchenette in the corner, exactly the bare room the photo had shown me, nothing hidden, nothing worse. I remember thinking, well, Bennett, you got lucky. The picture told the truth, the price came down, and that's a fine day's work. Time to unpack. Here's the part I still come back to 10 years later, because I was about to learn the photo hadn't lied to me. It had just been aimed at the wrong wall. Let me explain what I mean, because this is the thing that turns the whole story sideways. That single listing shot the one photo I'd stared at for weeks, the one I'd trusted and feared in equal measure, the one I'd wired real money against it showed the front of the room, the near wall, the fan, the tile, the little kitchenette, everything I could see standing in the doorway, and it was all true. Every bit of it. The photo hadn't cheated me by a single inch, but a photo can only point one way, and whoever held that camera had pointed it at the front, at the plain part, at the part that photographs like every cheap room you've ever scrolled past. They'd framed the least of it. What the picture never once showed me was the back. I want you to picture the room the way I was standing in it. Bag on the floor, Rosalie's mangoes on the counter behind me. Me looking at the four walls I thought I'd already memorized from 6,000 miles away. And it took me a minute, a full minute, maybe more, before my eyes drifted past the kitchenette to the far end, to the wall the photo had turned its back on. There was a shape there I hadn't clocked on the way in. I'd walked right past it, hauling my bag, my head full of numbers and relief. A frame, a darker rectangle, set into that back wall, half in shadow, easy to miss in a room, lit only from the front, a door. There was a door at the back I'd never noticed, a plain screen door the listing photo had never once shown me, and when I reached out and slid it open, everything I thought I'd rented changed in a single second. And there it was, a wall of warm sea air pushed straight through the whole place, front to back, the kind of cross ventilation I'd never paid a single peso for and never once expected. But the air was only the messenger. It was what the air was carrying in from outside that stopped me cold. Past that plain screen door was a short, sandy path, 40 steps. I know because I counted them later, more than once, standing there like a fool because part of me still didn't quite believe it. 40 steps of soft, warm sand, and then the water. Not a view in a frame. Not a pretty picture of the ocean hung on somebody's wall to make a bare room look nicer. The real sea. Close enough that I could stand in that doorway and hear it breathing in and out, in and out. If your chest just tightened a little, picturing that good. That's the exact feeling I had right then with my hands still resting on that screen door, not moving, barely breathing, just looking like I'd walked into the wrong life by accident and nobody had caught the mistake yet. Because here's the part I keep coming back to. Even after 10 years out here, the one thing I'd been most afraid of, the whole flight over sick to my stomach about wiring my money to a stranger, was that the photo was hiding something from me. A crack running down the wall, a room half the size of the picture. Some ugly little secret the listing didn't want an old man from the States to see until it was too late. Well, it was hiding something, all right? It was hiding the sea, it was hiding how good it really was. The whole thing had turned out backwards. Every worst case I'd packed into my head on that plane, every dark little story I'd told myself in that cold kitchen just flipped clean over. The wall the photo was pointed at was the one wall in the place that didn't matter. It had its back to the ocean the entire time. I want to be straight with you the way I always am. It's not paradise with a bow on it. That sea air I loved so much, it rusts every hinge and every screw within a year, and the sand finds its way into everything you own. That's the honest price of living 40 steps from the water, and I'd pay it again tomorrow without blinking. That first evening, I just stood out on the sand as the sun went down, watching it drop into the water at the end of those 40 steps, and I felt like a thief. Like a man who'd handed over lunch money and been given the keys to something he had no business owning. Behind me, back through that open screen door, the fan was ticking and a couple of geckos were chirping on the wall. In front of me, the whole sky went orange. That first night, I left the screen door open on purpose, just the mesh between me and the whole Pacific, and I slept better than I had in a long, long time. Then something woke me. 5:30 in the morning, an engine small, patient, putt-putting its way in from the dark water, closer and closer until it was right off my little stretch of sand. I pulled on my shorts and stepped out onto that path in the gray half-light, and there was Boyet, the fisherman who lived 2 doors down, a wiry fellow with a straw hat gone soft at the brim, dragging his blue banca up out of the surf with a whole night's catch heaped in the bottom of it. He looked up, saw the new American standing there blinking at the sunrise, and he grinned at me, this big, easy, gap-toothed grin, reached down and lifted a fish straight up out of the boat. Still bright, still wet, still moving. You want, sir? Fresh. That was my alarm clock. That was my breakfast. 2 doors down at 5:30 in the morning, handed to me by a man who'd